Alright, cloud gurus, demo time. We're going to look at configuring kubectl to talk to a cluster as a brand new user using client certs. We'll run some tests to see how that user's locked out by default, and then we'll open things up with some roles and role bindings. But a couple of things. One, this is an RBAC demo, so no admission control stuff. And some of the non-Kubernetes stuff, like creating the certificates, that's not going to be following best practices. I mean, the Kubernetes stuff will be, but creating and managing certs and stuff, you know what? I'm just throwing together a demo lab. So the plan's this. I've got a cluster on AWS that I've built with KOPS, the Kubernetes operations tool. So if you're following along on a cluster somewhere else, especially maybe a hosted one like EKS or something, well, things like where the root CA stuff is, that's going to be different. And you know what? Maybe on some of the hosted platforms, you can't even get to that stuff. I don't know, but it's okay, right? Because we're here to see the roles and the role bindings, not the cluster CA. Anyway, I've got a cluster and it's divided into namespaces because, in my opinion, they are an absolute must for proper RBAC. Well, we'll create a client certificate for a user called Mia that is a member of the ACG group. After that, we'll configure kubectl to operate as that user and we'll do some operations. And they'll fail because we haven't created any permissions. So we'll create a role and a binding and we'll try the operations again. And this time they'll work. Well, hopefully. And if they do, we can crack open a beer or whatever it is you do in your culture to celebrate, and we'll sit back and enjoy a recap. So I'm on a Linux host here so that I can use OpenSSL to create some certs. This is the hacky bit, yeah? Well, we'll use this to create a private key for our user. Yep, that's it. We'll then use that to create a certificate signing request that we're going to get the cluster's CA to sign. Now then, these fields are important. The username that you want this certificate to represent needs to go in the CN property here. It's a text string, but whatever you put is what Kubernetes is going to see the user as. And same goes for organization here. This is the user's group, and you can have as many of these as you want if you need more than one. Okay, well, I need the cluster's key pair to sign the request. And this is something that varies between installations, and if you're on a hosted service with a managed control plane, it's possible you might not even be able to do this. Check the docs for your installation. Anyway, for a KOPS cluster on AWS, they get shoved in an S3 bucket somewhere like this. I've downloaded them locally, which I know is a risk, but like I said, right, I'm just hacking in a lab. Anyway, this'll do the trick. And we should have a certificate here for our new user, which we do. Magic. Now for the Kubernetes stuff. kubectl's got this config file in a hidden directory in your profile, and it basically lists the clusters it knows about and the users it can talk to the API server as. So we'll use this command here to tell kubectl about the user. Obviously the location of the certs and stuff here is going to be different for you, but you get the picture, right? You're saying, hey kubectl, I've got this user here called Mia. Well, actually this is just a nickname, so you can call it whatever you want, right? The real username is embedded in the cert, yeah? But these here are her creds. Magic. That'll create an entry in the config file. Then this'll actually create a context associating her with a cluster. So we're all set to go. But right now, we're connecting as some pre-created user that's mapped to cluster admin. So this command here to list pods, this is definitely going to work. All right. But if we switch contexts to our new user, run that same command again, and we are denied. So that's us posting requests to the API server as a new user, and RBAC's locking us out. That's what we expected, yeah? So to open up that operation, we need a role and a role binding. Now, I've got this here as a role, well, a cluster role actually. Same thing, right? Just means I can use it across any namespace. Anyway, roles are resources under this API group, and V1 means they're stable. I'm calling this one ACG RBAC, and then I'm saying in the core API group, that's what these empty quotes mean, the original core API group, on pod resources, allow get, list, and watch. Now, you can do other stuff here like this if you want. The world's your oyster, right? But for now, all we want to do is allow Mia to list pods. Brilliant. Let's have it. Ah, rats, I'm doing this as Mia, no permissions. Let's try it again with the default context that's got admin. Better. But we know that a role's not enough, right? We need to bind it to our user. So I've got a role binding for that. Same API group, yeah, call it whatever. And this one's namespaced, so it's only going to work in the ACG namespace. And we're saying bind the user Mia to that role we just created. So we'll have that as well. Just amend this. And with both of those in place, well, we're still posting requests as Mia. But look, now we're allowed to list the pods. Brilliant. But what about maybe services? Not allowed. Least privilege, yeah? We only created rules to let her list pods. And that's our back. We created a certificate for a user called Mia. The cluster trusts that certificate because we used its own CA to sign it. We configured kubectl to post requests as her. Initially, we couldn't list pods because the cluster's locked down. But we opened things up a bit with a role and a role binding. And that's it. And like I said at the start, pretty easy once you know a couple of things. So crack out that celebratory drink or whatever and sit back and enjoy a quick recap.